Good morning, class, and Professor Mackey. How's it going? All right, so I can't believe we're here. We're already to the final week of this course, and we are at the final project, and this is my literature review presentation. Yeah, we'll jump right into it. I hope you have secured my presentation. So we'll jump right into the introduction. And a while back at work, this gentleman, he gave me a book. I'll speed this up because I know I've talked to you about this already, Professor. But I had a book that was given to me. It was called Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, and I read the whole book. And I thought this was a great quote because, sadly for the last couple of years, throughout all time, there's been probably social problems, but the last couple of years, there's been a lot of them. And I thought this was interesting because it really kind of dug into the right to the stem of the issue, and it's about people being educated on the ways people interact. And I'll go ahead and read the quote to the class, but it says, "Whenever you first rise in the morning, tell yourself, I will encounter busybodies, ingrates, egomaniacs, liars, the jealous, and cranks. They are all stricken with these afflictions because they don't know the difference between good and evil. Because I have understood the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, I know that these wrongdoers are still akin to me, and that none can do harm to me or implicate me in ugliness. Nor can I be angry at my relatives or hate them, for we are made for cooperation." And I thought that was fascinating because I did my project on a lot of things that are encompassed in postmodern communication theories, and postmodern meaning in the relevant age, or in the 2020 time frame. But this quote really grounds it in a historical sense, as people have been dealing with not agreeing with people for a very long time, and there's always been people who have been educated, that are fortunate enough to be educated through schools or through just life experiences, and there's people that aren't. And it's our duty as liberally educated people to communicate what's right and what's wrong, and we can't really necessarily hold it against the ignorant, so to speak, if they have wrong opinions or different ones than ours. And let's jump right into it. On slide 3, a lot of these postmodern problems occur on social media, and it's interesting because we as humans have always communicated with either written words or, most importantly, spoken words to one another. And the vast majority of it, until the Industrial Revolution and the creation of the printing press before that, things had been word of mouth. Stories. Plato's stories weren't initially written down. They had to get hand jammed for some time after the story, and it was just all oral history. And in those relationships, there's a nuance, there's narrative theories, there's my dog. There's nuance and communications that occur in a healthy way. And on social media, we don't get that, and I think that's a large problem of it. Especially with Twitter, you're only relegated to 160 characters, and it's all one way. No one ever says 5 or 6 points and then they just stop, and then someone else says 5 or 6 points and then they just stop. It's a dialogue that we enter in with the person, and there's nuance within this. And I put the pictures of the cavemen around the fire, and then a philosopher or orator back in ancient Greek. That's how we used to talk, and it's important to remember that when we enter in conflict or discussion on social media. A thing, so we're going to go down to slide 4 here. A thing that I've noticed a lot, especially with my dad and my wife's uncles and aunts, they exhibit third-person effect all the time by sharing really potent memes that are divisive, and there's no narrative. They just click the share button, and it seems like no one takes the time anymore to create their own opinion on these things. So if you have a feeling about the most recent thing with NASCAR banning their Confederate flags, people just share the memes as opposed to writing a long form opinion about it, or engaging in discussion with someone who doesn't do that. And so in my paper, I talk about some of the research that I found, and it just showcases what third person effect is. And probably some of you in the class that have researched that already. In earlier in the course, it was one of the theories that we were supposed to look into. I found it as fascinating, and I didn't know what it was until I saw it in person. Like until I read it and was like doctrinally understood it and I operationalized the term. And so, yeah, I witnessed third person effect a lot on social media, and I think that's what underpins a lot of the conflicts that go on and like kind of stirs the fire, so to speak, because people think that, oh, I understand this meme from this ultra right Facebook page, and I get it, but I'm going to share it to my peers because it'll have more of an effect on them. And in actuality, who really knows if they're getting impacted by the memes? But I would ascertain or think that it does impact people. And then it brings me into the fifth slide, and it talks about the spiral of negativity as it relates to communication. The graphic there is out of one of the previous books that we've used in the course work pipeline at Florida Southern. So it might look familiar to you, but it's you exhibit a behavior, the perception of the relationship occurs, and then the perception of others occurs as well. And then you go back into behavior, possibly most likely bad, and then your perception of others. And it's a cycle of discretion, and it just goes all the way down until most of the time people unfriend you, or they, just completely blow up the conversation and make it personal. They get away from the ideas. And it's we see it with bullying. People will get into these negative arguments with each other, and then they'll delete people that don't agree with them, and it creates these echo chambers of a lot of times like baseless opinions, and no one ever disagrees with you. A beautiful thing about human interaction is people will help you refine your opinions by disagreeing with you, and no one does that a lot these days, and if they do, it's on a Facebook post, and a lot with like people on slide 4, the older generation, they get so offended because they're afraid to entertain new ideas, and they're afraid to be wrong, even though the times are changing in a good way right now. It's tragic that we had to have a death of an African American man in Minneapolis named George Floyd, and all the national protests. And I know this is just going to you, but I would talk to the class, and I'm sure everyone would, has seen this at this point. It's just absurd. But at this point, I think the nation's really going in a good way, and that goes to the next thing, and a very important thing. Racism and the act of othering on social media. So we saw what happened to George Floyd. That led to looting and riots, and now we see, the flag there that they banned, which is a great thing. If you ask me, from the sporting events and all that stuff. And so it just goes to show you that racism does occur on social media, and it underpins a lot of the conflicts that we see in the world as well. And it perhaps I think it generates the conflicts, and people do get bullied, but in a other side of the coin, things do get better as time goes on. And I think social media isn't a blessing and it's not a curse at the same time. It's just we need to refine how we're talking to each other and how we're potentially othering people or creating problems with people. It's a shame that everyone can't be ethical and respectful of other people's differences, but they can't, and that's what the point of my whole presentation is, to kind of educate people to how to interact and how to make the situation better, kind of be an agent of good and an agent of, create safe spaces for everyone on social media, even if you have different opinions. It's not right to get angry. And the problem is with this, so we're going to set this seventh slide here. I talk about this in depth in my paper, and I wish I could go into it a lot more. But Jack Dorsey, the founder of Twitter, they banned this political commentator Alex Jones from basically all social media. It started with Twitter, then YouTube banned him, and then Facebook banned him. Uh, and he has millions of viewers, and a lot of people think that he's a kind of a fringy kind of crackpot kind of guy. Um, but the fact is that they banned him, and they don't have any way for him to go back to. There's no path back for salvation, so to speak, for him, which is a huge thing for free speech, because if Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg, they control the market share of social media that the majority uses, but then they ban someone, it's an argument of free speech at that point, and access to that should be a right. And so, yeah, you should be able to be banned from social media. That's totally fine. But a thing of permanence is kind of a problem when we think about, his critical aspects of politics and what he's disclosed in his past. But I won't get into that in this point. I just found some fascinating, research on this in my paper, and I included it in there. And yeah, that's basically my presentation for this. And it's a shame we couldn't have done it in person. I know the conversations would be outstanding. But yeah, that's the genesis and the framework of my paper. And the conclusion of this would be to have everyone understand their role on social media and how to re-intertwine these better relationships that we have that resemble something more of the past, with more narrative, dialogue, understanding, and definitely empathy. Yeah, thank you for watching, and have a good day.